So have you been thinking about getting into Anthuriums for a while now, but you're actually a bit unsure in terms of the care that you can give them, which one is the best for you in your conditions with your level of care? Stick around with me, and in this video I will go through my nearly 40 Anthurium collection and give you my this or that opinion. Hi there, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So today's the first part. I know this might annoy some of you, but this is going to be a two-part series and I will not keep you waiting for too long. So the first video will come out at the beginning of the week, the second video will come out hopefully at the end of the same week. So you'll get the full thing in the 1 week, fingers crossed. But everybody wanted me to do this or that of my Anthuriums, and I wanted to do it justice by showing you, if I could, all of my Anthuriums. Now, my initial thinking when I was going to start this video is I'm going to bring every single Anthurium out and show you. The reality then kicked in and then realised that some of my largest Anthuriums are going to be exceptionally hard to move. So my promise to you for both of these videos is I will try to get as many as possible out to show you. If not, I will add videos or photos of some of the bigger ones that are harder to move. And when you understand some of the sizes of these plants, it might make a bit more sense basically. Right, without further ado, let's dive into the first plant. And shall we start off strong with everybody's usually favourite Anthurium, which is the Queen Anthurium, or the Anthurium warocqueanum. You can see mine's got a bit of crisping at the bottom, which I will just take off right now. Ta-da! It's that simple. And this is the one that a lot of people generally will be searching for and wanting and desperately needing to add into their collections. I have got a beautiful new leaf that is coming through. However, I will say that I have noticed out of a lot of my Anthuriums, that is one that, and for the people that have been here for a while, that is the one that a lot of the mealybugs will gravitate towards. Yay! I will follow that comment up really quickly by saying that the mealybugs don't tend to do quite as much damage if I catch them early enough when the new leaf is emerging. However, this isn't one of the easiest Anthuriums. Starting off strong, as I said. This isn't one of the easiest Anthuriums, even though this is one that a lot of people want in their collections. And it is because it's a velvety Anthurium, it's got large leaves, has more surface area. The leaves can take a while to fully harden off, especially when you've got like larger leaves. But as a whole, I would not say this if you're starting off, and I have had some flack in the past for this, this is not one for you to try as your first Anthurium. A lot of people might say go for a Clarinervium, and I used to have a Clarinervium, but it's not in this video. I will give it an honourable mention here. If you are the type of plant parent that likes to underwater or you're forgetful with your watering, your Clarinervium is going to be your big best friend, basically. I killed it like that because I overwatered it. But what I like to say with that one is if you can keep a Phalaenopsis orchid alive, you can keep a Clarinervium alive as well. Very similar root structure, and it doesn't need quite as much water. It does need water still, but if you are an underwater, that is a good place to start. But know that going into Anthuriums, if you think that even slightly you might get the bug, the Clarinervium will give you a false sense of security, at least in my experience with my specific Anthuriums. That is an outlier in terms of kind of how little watering needs it has in relation to other Anthuriums. So bear that in mind. But yeah, Queen Anthurium, this or that kind of situation. I now understand when people say that if you want to get something like a Queen Anthurium and you want those long strappier leaves, and you want to go for something that's a bit velvety again, maybe go for the warocqueanum basically. And I have got that to show you basically. But first plant down, Anthurium warocqueanum, in my opinion, and maybe we should give this scores actually. In my opinion, if 10 is the best, 0 is the worst. Again, my opinion, in my experience, in my conditions, with my care, I would maybe give this a solid, benchmarking is against other Anthuriums, a solid 7, 6 or a 7, basically. It's beautiful. I came around to it more than I thought I was going to. It is one that a lot of people are right. You look at it the wrong way and it can throw a hissy fit. So bear that in mind, and it does need, I would imagine, a lot of humidity. It's in my conservatory, it gets a lot of humidity. I would imagine this is one for glass cabinets and things like that, or right next to a humidifier. This is one that will probably benefit a lot from it. Probably because of where it grows, it might be growing close to cloud forest. I can't remember now off the top of my head, but you would want this to kind of get as much humidity as possible. Now let's move on to an Anthurium that I would suggest instead of the Anthurium, and you'll see me do that a lot today because the summer has arrived more or less and the pests are in full swing. But this is a propagation, so this was a pup from my Anthurium Crystallinum, and this one was an interesting one because me, like a lot of other people, when we bought this, a lot of us bought it from the same eBay seller, if I'm not mistaken. And originally, the plant was sold to us as forgetii / Anthurium. This shows absolutely no sign of its parents being forgetii or Anthurium. It's not thick enough in terms of the leaves, but it does have a lot of the traits of a Crystallinum. So I have assumed for a while now whilst growing this that this is pretty much a Crystallinum basically, and it's fine. I kind of wanted to get a Crystallinum at some point in my care and I could not be happier. This is a plant that I would 100% recommend to people when they're starting off. If they don't want to go for Anthurium and they want to go for a Crystallinum, kind of that initial kind of intro Anthurium into the whole thing. So my this or that would be between a Anthurium and a Crystallinum, go for a Crystallinum. And as I said, this is a pup. I will see about adding a picture or a video somewhere here of my mother plant, and my mother plant's leaves are definitely at least 1 meter long at this point, so, but it is buried behind the camera in between shelves. It's not moving anytime soon. But that one has not skipped a beat for me. Both of these I'm growing in semi-hydro, as I did with my Queen Anthurium, but I'll bring it in again so you can kind of see what the leaf looks like. A lot of people by this point, I would imagine, know what a Crystallinum would look like. And it's one that I find to be really unfussy. The reason why I would choose this over a Anthurium, for me, the leaves are a bit more interesting in this, but also this is more of a true representation of what you're going to have to deal with when it comes to Anthuriums. So this kind of watering needs for this is probably more similar to most Anthuriums than the Anthurium. Again, my opinion for most of this video. But yeah, if I was to give this one a score, say out of 10, I would say that this one would be quite close to a 10 actually, like a 9 or a 10, just because it's not fussy, again my experience, and it is a beautiful leaf. It's got some of that velvetiness. It's very adaptable, at least I found. Granted, I have grown most of my Anthuriums almost exclusively in conservatory or high humidity situations, so I can only comment on that. The Anthurium, when I did have it, I did grow it in regular household humidity and it was fine, but I think this might be able to take it too. If anybody has grown the Crystallinum in a household humidity environment and they've had successes or failures, please let us all know in the comments down below. But yeah, this is the Anthurium Crystallinum. And whilst we're at it, I think this video might end up becoming a bit more of the more commonly found Anthuriums. And I'll intersperse a couple of the ones that are a bit more odd and that are in my collection on this one, but I think more of those will be in the second part of the video. But let's have a look at another one that's become a bit easier to find again. And that is the Anthurium forgetii. And you can tell that it's a forgetii by the tail fused sinus. And the sinus means that, you know how we were looking at it before with the Crystallinum and it had those little lobes and it looked like a heart at the top? This one is fused. So you can see that it kind of joins up at the middle, and that's what makes a forgetii a forgetii. I have no clue which forgetii I have got. I don't even remember how the forgetii came into my care. It's not one that has very pronounced kind of venation. I know some of them can have very pronounced venation, and that gives you a bit of an indication of size. I've had this for a good few years now, and I have enjoyed growing it. Again, it's another velvety kind of dark leaf Anthurium. It's got relatively succulent leaves, really sturdy. It's got really thick, chunky roots. I have been growing this. This has struggled for me backwards and forwards over the years, and it kind of like downsized back to like one leaf or maybe no leaves, and then it was doing fine basically. But in terms of my experience with this one, and I do enjoy growing it, I will start there because you know where this is heading, but it doesn't excite me. Now, am I unhappy that it's in my collection? No. I would like my collection to have a forgetii in it. The fused sinus doesn't do it for me that much. However, I do like the venation. I don't know why. I think my imagination is a bit weird, and if I squint hard enough, this looks almost like a bug shell to me. I don't know why. It kind of almost like a bug shell or a bit alien-esque. Yeah, it's just really interesting the way that the veins work on the way that the veins show up on a forgetii. Now, do I have a this or that for this one? And I won't have it for all the plants, by the way, just to make that clear. Possibly, again, instead of this, I would still go for the Crystallinum that we were just looking at a moment ago. It's a bit more interesting in my opinion, and the leaves can get truly huge. This one can get very, very large leaves. I think it might eventually get a sinus. I might be wrong. I've never grown this to a huge size, obviously, because this is the only one that I own. But if you have, does it get a sinus again? Or does it always have that fused sinus, even when it gets much, much larger? The reason why I'm saying Crystallinum instead of this is because, at least in my experience, and I think this might be true for a lot of people, the forgetii isn't one of the fastest growing Anthuriums. It can take a while to kind of get going, and even when it does, like as I said, I've had this for like about at least 3 years at this point, and this is all I've managed to achieve. Granted, it's because there's been some failings in the winter. This one I find more sensitive in the winter than some of my other Anthuriums, but it's still doing okay. And this, it's looking a bit janky, but at the same time, this poor plant in the last month has probably fallen off its shelf at least 7 times. So, and on a newly emerging leaf. So the fact that I've got a bit of tearing that you might be able to see right there, and that's the only thing that happened to it, is a testament to the hardiness of this plant. So, scoring wise, out of 10, maybe a 6, maybe a 5. It just doesn't excite me that much. As I said, I do enjoy growing it, and I wouldn't not have it in my collection, but yeah, it doesn't set my world on fire, basically. Right, and let's move on to an Anthurium that I bought relatively recently. I would imagine it was last year at this point. And so this is the Anthurium villenaorum, I think. And I'll bring it in so you can see there is some pest damage in that most newest recent leaves. That's a bit more like what it would be. And the interesting thing with this, and I have said this on other videos, is possibly the only plant that I'm aware of that I even own, that the petioles, so what attaches the leaf to the stem, is like a triangle. So if you were to cut the petiole, it's like a triangle. It's really, really cool. I've never seen this before. I've seen square petioles, I've seen what's it called? Pentagonal petioles. I've seen round petioles. I've never seen a triangular petiole in terms of this, basically. Now, this is an interesting one because I think this is a favorite for a lot of people, and I've been wanting to love it for a long time, and I did when it didn't have an awful lot of problems. So you can see it's not looking like it's living its best life. It is in semi-hydro. It has had some root rot at some point. It probably isn't getting the level of light that it needs. I think this one's getting some of the lowest light levels that I've got for my Anthuriums. And I think I've got a sneaky suspicion that a lot of people are going to turn around and say in the comments of this video, it's one of the Anthuriums that probably needs a bit more light. And that's probably what I'm doing wrong. But hopefully there'll be a reshuffle in here soon and I'll be able to give this a bit more light. But to be fair, it is a fighter. Like, it's had an awful lot of things go wrong to it, and it just keeps on going. Is this the fastest Anthurium I own? No. But it is one that is interesting. The leaves are quite cool. This was also one for a long period of time. If people were ordering from companies like Equigenera, this was one of the cheaper end of the Anthuriums that they had. So a lot of people would be like, oh, I need to like spend X amount of money on my order. I've got all the plants that I need. What do I get? I'll just put this in my basket. This was an impulse purchase, I think, for a lot of people. So I'd be curious to see if anybody got it for that reason, not because they saw it and they liked it, but as an impulse purchase. I know. I know. How have you found it? Because I enjoyed it, and I probably would have enjoyed it more if it was getting quite large. I think a couple of people that I know have either got it as a much more mature plant than I did, or has grown it to a bit more mature plant. Tanya, hi, if you see this. I think your plant's like quite large, and I don't know if you bought it like that or if you kind of grew it to that stage, and yours looks super happy and super like thriving basically. Do let me know, anybody who has had experience with this plant and have been growing it well, like what you were doing basically. I'm growing this in semi-hydro without a water reservoir, at least for the winter time. But scoring wise, this is an interesting one, because after having said all that, I would probably give this a 6 or a 7 in terms of a score. I don't think I would give it much lower of a score. But in terms of this or that for this plant, I don't know if I've got anything that's even vaguely similar to this. I'm trying to think around my collection. And I don't want to keep going back to the Crystallinum basically. But no, I don't think I've got anything that's very similar. The texture isn't that rubbery, but actually probably the closest thing, and I'm looking at it because behind the camera, the closest thing isn't an Anthurium to this. That's giving similar-ish vibes if you squint hard enough. The veination isn't quite so contrasty. But this versus the Syngonium chiapense, I would go for the Syngonium chiapense. It's similar-ish vibes, even though it's not fully the same, but this is the closest I get to that rubbery feel, I think, basically. But yeah, that's my opinions on the Anthurium villenaorum. Now for the next one, I will be adding photos or clips somewhere that you can see, because it is just not movable, basically. And that is my Anthurium veitchii. And I do have one that I could show you. It's looking a bit basic, or I should say very basic at this point. So very, very juvenile form of this basically. And that is the veitchii with the usual ripples. It's looking a bit worse for wear, but this one has always been problematic for me. And you can see it kind of ripped the newest leaf. But let me put this back down and I'll bring up the Mama Jama plant basically. Okay, so my big plant, and I'm kind of looking at it now, the newest leaf that came in, we're kind of looking, because it's not going to have any context in the video, we're looking at probably about that big. Well, it's not even on camera basically. I would imagine probably about 1.5 meters. So it's doing exceptionally well. And it's got those ruffles, and the leaves are relatively leathery and they're quite thick. Most people by this point might know what the Anthurium veitchii is, or the King Anthurium. And it's a shame, and I've said this before, and I will keep saying this until I'm blue in the face. I still, controversial opinion, I still think I prefer the veitchii to my Queen Anthurium. So the King versus the Queen, so this or that, and I know they're not necessarily similar other than the fact that they've got strappy leaves. I would go for the veitchii over the warocqueanum any day of the week, basically. I have really enjoyed growing my Queen Anthurium, but I still think I prefer my veitchii. And those like kind of roughly abs, again, you get a lot of these alien-esque vibes from it. And the one thing I will say, hands down, I think this might be one of my easiest Anthuriums to grow. Hands down. It's not really had issues. Ignore the tiny one. There is a story for the people that have been here for a while. I will quickly do a synopsis of it. Bought that one originally, came to me with root rot, been trying to rehab it since 2000. It's been 4 years. Hasn't done much better than that. Granted, I have only ever grown it in semi-hydro. At this point, I'm moving some plants back into kind of a soil mixture. I might try it in a soil mixture and see if it does any better, basically. But my other one, which I started as a little tiny little seedling, which a lot of people struggled with at some point. That one has always done better for me and is now absolutely stonking huge. That is growing in semi-hydro. That has got a water reservoir even in the winter, and it does really, really, really well. So my this or that for this one would be, versus the warocqueanum, get this one. Score a solid 10 basically for me on this one. Really, really enjoy this plant. It's not for everybody. I get that not everybody likes those ruffles, but it still does. It's one of these things that if all of us that have got these big collections of rare plants basically that might look just like green and normal to everybody else, that is one that if you want to wow people as soon as they come through the door, that is one of these rare plants that is still a bit showy basically. Like people will be like, "Ooh, what is this? It looks weird, it looks kind of odd." King Anthurium for the win every time for me. Right, and the next one I'm not going to move, but I have moved you basically, and I will lift this leaf up so you might be able to see. Oh no, oh no, I think that was yeah. Apologies whilst I take off the remains of the cut off inflorescence that I took off it basically. But this is my Anthurium veitchii, not veitchii, Vittarifolium, and some of these are the newest leaves, that's why I'm picking them up, so you can kind of see their coloration. You can see some of the oldest leaves which are slowly kind of dying away, but we are talking, if you want a strappy leaf Anthurium, this will win for me every time, hands down. And I have grown that again, just to give some context on my Vittarifolium. I have been growing this, how many years now? I want to say at least 4, it might be going on 5. And I did get it relatively small as a plant, and it has been super easy to grow. Like again, this is another one that has got very, very, very chunky, substantial roots, very similar to Phalaenopsis orchid. And it does, out of a lot of the Anthuriums, this does like to go a bit dry. So, this is an interesting one. So this or that for this one, and this will feature in a lot of this or that for strappy leaf Anthuriums, those are coming up. But this or that for this one, again, looking at the Clarinervium, which is very similar in the, it's not like most Anthuriums that it does like to dry out a bit, I would actually go for the Vittarifolium. And for me, it's much more interesting. Again, this is a really cool plant. If you've got high shelves somewhere in your house and you can't give the plant top-down lighting, Vittarifolium, because all the leaves will hang down. Word of caution though. This thing, unless it's in a very heavy pot, and that's the reason why I have it in semi-hydro, and even then, what you might not be able to see is I've got those metal twisty plant ties, which I don't use for my plants predominantly, but I have used to literally anchor the entire pot onto my metal shelf, because it does have a propensity to want to throw itself off the shelf, especially when it gets large. Which kind of makes sense because this plant would be growing in nooks and crannies of trees and the leaves would just be pendant and kind of like trailing down. So it kind of makes sense. But for me, this is another one that if I was to give it a score, 10, it's another 10. And this video's got a lot of 10s, I think. But this one, yeah, this one without hesitation. And I know that I've been saying for a while, and I still want to find one that's relatively more mature, but the Anthurium, ooh. Oh, I am blocking now, but the one with the corkscrew inflorescence, why am I blocking now? But I will put it at the top there. And I know they're on the market a bit more. They're still not super cheap, but they're quite small. I want to see if I can get one that's slightly larger than they're selling at the moment, but I think I might have to wait for a bit for that one. But I know from some people that that one can be a bit slow. I have not found, this isn't the fastest growing Anthurium, but it is still relatively fast in my care, especially when you get it a bit larger. And I know a lot of you have actually recently bought this. Have fun. I hope it goes well for you. But like, oh, my Vittarifolium makes me very happy. Let's put it that way. Okay, so the next one is going to be one that I'm going to attempt to bring down. I might not, and I might need to put a video, but let me see if I can get it down. Huzzah! And I did this with a brand new leaf because I like to live life on the riskier side of things. So this is an uncommon new leaf. This is the first leaf that it brings out in the growing season, and it's doing okay, but ignore the normal shape, and this has been struggling with mealybugs as soon as it came out, and I'm probably going to need to spray this just before I put it back in. Hopefully it didn't get blown out too much there. But this leaf on this side is more traditional in terms of this plant. And, oh, there's bugs on this as well. See, this is what happens when you can't see your plants and they're against windows. But it's what I always say with things like mealybugs and Anthuriums, if it's on a mature leaf, it can't do too much damage. Now this one's an interesting one because normally this is the point where I would be giving you what the name is of this plant. Do not know. It was sold to me as a Metallicum. This is not a Metallicum, as we've come to a conclusion. This is probably some form of a hybrid. What it's hybridized with, I do not know, but I do have a Metallicum because a lovely one of you people I got one and we did a trade and I got a Metallicum of that individual, and I will show you what the Metallicum looks like. I will give it its own section in just a moment, but let me show you the Metallicum. This is an Anthurium Metallicum, and you can see it is definitely different. Like, look at the leaves. Definitely different to what I was just showing you just a moment ago. However, so for the people that want to do some scientific investigation when it comes to these plants, let me see. So there's no real ruffles at the petiole join with the leaf, and the leaf petiole has got 1, 2, 3, 4. It's got five kind of edges on the petiole. So it's like a pentagon. So that's what I have for this one. As I said, this is usually what happens in the beginning with the newest leaf when it comes in. It's a bit more flat in terms of the sinus, but it does eventually, when the next leaves come in, it does have a bit more of a pronounced heart. So with this one, it's interesting because I can give you a this or that with this one, but the problem is I don't know what it is, so I don't know what you would be buying instead of whatever this is, basically. But hopefully that makes sense. But in honor of showing as many, or if not, if possible, all of my Anthuriums, I had to show you this. So with this one, I like it. The issues that I get with this sometimes, and let me move it so you can see the slightly better leaf. The issue that I have with this one is in the summer, it's in semi-hydro and it desperately needs a water reservoir because it's very thirsty in the summer. But in the winter, it almost goes down to, I don't want any water at all. I get watered once a month, and that is plenty, and I definitely do not need a water reservoir, otherwise I will rot out all my leaves. And to be fair, this is a leaf that survived since last summer. Most of the years that I've had this, and I've had this for nearly 4 years now, it will almost entirely lose all of its leaves and start again from a stump. But it's never had an issue. It will always bounce back. It's got kind of leathery leaves. But yeah, so there's no this or that for this one. In terms of a score, solid 8. Solid 8. I really do enjoy this plant. And yeah, it's a shame that I can't tell you exactly what it is. I really wish, because it's actually quite a nice, if it is a hybrid, a very nice hybrid. Right, let's do one more for this part of the video, and I think I'm going to have to close this video down, and I'll see you in part 2. But let me bring up the last one. Okay, and the last one for this video is this beauty here. So that is the newest leaf, and this is one of its oldest leaves. So I will say this has got better with age, and you can see it's very, very janky. It's got a janky support stick holding it up. I did not realize this is a climbing Anthurium rather than some of the other ones that tend to be a bit more low growing. This one will go up, and it will go up quite quickly, but you can see the shape of the leaves there. And then names for this one is interesting. So I've got my phone down here. So Anthurium Batas is what I bought this as, but I think it's also called, or it is now called, Anthurium pandaluminanium. Oh, I will add the name at the top there. It's a very, very long name, basically. But, and I do have a plant that's very similar to this, which is much younger than this. But the one thing I will say with this, it has always been infested with mealybugs, and you might be able to see that it's dripping at the moment. I have had to deal with a lot of mealybugs on this, but it doesn't really ever hamper it too much. I will say it is a plant that will just keep on trucking on, but it will lose leaves every winter without fail. And the thing with this that I found in the beginning is that when it does come in, the leaves are papery thin. So kind of think of crepe paper basically. And then they do harden off, and it's still one of the thinner leaved Anthuriums. So watch this for bugs and pests that tend to like properly munch on leaves. This would be a problem, but very, very cool, cool shape. Would I get this again in my collection? I don't know. I have enjoyed growing it. As I said, there's another one that will be in part 2, which I think I would prefer this or that, but I will let you know about that in the second video. And in terms of the score for this one, I'm growing it in semi-hydro, and you might spot a theme with a lot of my scores when it comes to the more climbing Anthuriums. I would probably give this maybe a 4 or a 5, just because I've always been dealing with pests with this one. But it might not be the plant, it might just be my care. It's still a beautiful Anthurium, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if it's worth the hassle, basically. Okay, and I will wrap this part of the video here. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Let me know maybe your scores if you've got some of these plants down below, just because it'd be a nice little compendium of information in the comments if somebody's looking at this, just so they don't just get my opinion, they can get some of your opinions as well. And yes, I shall see you very soon in the next installment. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you then. And I really, really hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.